There are so many things you could be doing tonight. So many other places you could be right now. You could be out to dinner. Maybe check out a Hollywood movie. But instead, you're staring at me, watching this. Why are you here? I'll tell you why. Because of matchups that come at you on nights like tonight. You're welcome.
Here we go, boys.
15, take 15.
Let's get this thing going.
No strangers in this one. Washington and New York have been playing each other since the 1930s. This rivalry goes way back. And the history's still alive and well tonight.
It's our night, and it's our division. It's time to stand up in our house.
The New York Giants take their history with them everywhere they go. Hey, why wouldn't they? They win Super Bowls. Oh, and one other thing. They hate the Redskins. And in Washington, the Redskins feel the same way. A rivalry that never seems to get old, only better.
Congratulations, Joe Gibbs. This one is over.
Football starts here.
And that's Don Cheadle's 2014 Thursday Night Football of the Giants and Redskins pregame. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the return of AFC SPORTalk podcast here just before the 2026 NFL Draft tomorrow night. I'm your host, Alex Chris, and I am here with my cousins Will Harris and Clay Sowers here tonight. Guys, just a little bit of a pump-up video for us here, and, maybe at the end, I'll do a pump-up video of Giants and Patriots, maybe.
Yeah, no need for that. I think the one with the Redskins is just fine.
Yeah. So how are you guys?
Yeah.
Guys ready to jump in and talk a little NFL here, and maybe a little bit later we'll delve into some trivia before we finish out for tonight.
Sounds good.
All right, so kind of just how we're gonna do this
Alex,
here.
You cut out a little bit. What did you say? Okay.
Oh yeah, I hear you. Are you good? Can I
No,
hear
you're good.
you?
Go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
I mean.
No, you're right.
Yep. All good.
Okay, great. So kind of what we're going to do here is, we're just going to kind of overview some of the divisions here. And obviously I didn't have a podcast last year, so we're just going to kind of overview this, kind of not so much talk about the draft picks, but kind of some overarching things through this offseason and what we'll see before the NFL season begins in a few months in August. So this first one is actually going to be directed to Will here, because we'll start with the AFC East here, and essentially how we've kind of seen the AFC East last year. Obviously, Will's Patriots doing an unbelievable bounce back season after a bit of a disappointment first year for Drake May, but a stellar sophomore campaign, got a couple of MVP votes, and led New England to, it's crazy to think, their first division title in 6 years, and leading them all the way to the Super Bowl before they came up short against the Seattle Seahawks. But Will, my question to you is this, though, kind of seeing how your Patriots took a huge step up last year, and obviously the Bills, obviously the disappointment with them losing in the Broncos to the divisional round last year against Denver, as I mentioned. Which team do you think is under more pressure kind of heading into this NFL draft as well as into this next season? Is it Drake May to have another really good season, or is it for the Bills, who have kind of had a bit of a disjointed offseason, obviously firing Sean McDermott, elevating Joe Brady, and kind of seeing that sort of power play between Brandon Beane and Josh Allen? Who do you think is under the most pressure in the AFC East, New England or Buffalo in 2026?
Yeah, I think it's well known that the Patriots majorly, overachieved last year. Going back from when they were 4-13 to a 14-3 season. They just absolutely overachieved. It was awesome for me to make it to another Super Bowl. Didn't turn out the way I wanted to, but to answer your question, I think it's definitely the Bills that have the most pressure going into next season. Just given the fact that, Josh Allen has been knocking on the door for so long and hasn't been able to break through. So, Bills.
Rich Dreamer's fine.
said theirs is fine.
Yeah, kind of just give my take on this. I'll ask Clay's take in a sec. I know he's kind of trying to maybe fix some issues here, but what I was going to say is I think, for the Bills in this state of their franchise, obviously, as I mentioned about them putting Joe Brady as their head coach, obviously, I think Sean McDermott deserves another coaching job, whether it's, next year or whatever it is. I think he's too good of a coach to basically just not have another chance with him. But what I will say, though, is that I think what's really big here for the Bills is I think the one thing that would be absolutely disastrous for the Buffalo Bills this year is if they miss the playoffs in their first year under Joe Brady and Josh Allen, because I think that immediately puts the pressure either on Bean, who made the decision, I think, to kind of placate Josh Allen and elevating Joe Brady as offensive coordinator. So if the Bills absolutely just miss the playoffs entirely, maybe if the Dolphins have a sneaky season this year, I don't think the Jets are on anybody's radar to compete in the AFC East as of yet. But I think as for Bills fans, like I said, I think that would be like the worst case scenario for the Bills to basically miss the playoffs if, either one, they don't continue their playoff stretch have they done since 2019 to 2025.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would be absolutely shocked if the Bills didn't make it to the playoffs at least. But for them, I just think that's not what they expect now. Like, they've made it so long, the last, I think you said 6 years. So I think for them, it's really Super Bowl or bust, and they've been itching to get back ever since they lost those 4 straight in the 90s. And they've had this window, and you hope for Bills Nation, it's not, the window's not closing.
Mm-hmm. Clay, you want to jump in here a little bit?
Is my connection back? My connection back, guys? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Talk about high expectations for a first-time head coach stepping into that role. I mean, it's kind of a, obviously he can prove himself, and you take the opportunity if you have it. But that's got to be one of the, I guess, best head coaching jobs, just because of the talent that you're stepping into and the opportunity that you have in front of you. But also the expectations have to be crazy, right? I mean, they've been such a successful franchise, even though they haven't gotten the job done the last couple of years, that like Will mentioned, it's kind of Super Bowl or bust. So it'd be interesting to see how it goes.
It will be. So how we're going to kind of actually switch gears here a little bit after talking the AFC East, we'll actually kind of delve into probably what has been one of the more competitive divisions, in both the AFC South and the AFC West. We'll actually first start off with the AFC South here first. I mean, the way that I saw the AFC South last year, obviously Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence had a really good season with them before they were bounced by the Buffalo Bills. Indianapolis, inking Daniel Jones that, expensive extension. We'll kind of see what Indianapolis does there. Houston, hopefully they build that offensive line around CJ Stroud. And then Tennessee as well has had a really interesting offseason too, giving Robert Saleh a second chance. I'm glad he went there to Tennessee. And obviously they've kind of plucked some Giants as well, getting Wandale and several other jettison Giants players to join the Titans there. But kind of just overseeing the AFC South, though, I know, as we kind of said, we almost in all agreement that probably it's going to be New England and Buffalo to at least represent the AFC in the playoff picture next year. But do you think that the AFC South could be a division this season in 2026, kind of how we saw the NFC North last year when basically all 4 teams were above 500? Do you think that's possible with the Titans, obviously kind of how they did their offseason, and if Cam Ward has a sophomore? How do you guys kind of see the AFC South playing out in 2026?
Yeah, I think, Jacksonville I thought was, really surprising with their record. They had a pretty successful running back tandem group that really performed well towards the end of the year. They had a drop off from their number one wide receiver in Brian Thomas. And I think Trevor Lawrence, finally stepped up and played the way that everyone expected him to out of college. I think with Indianapolis and Tennessee, it's all going to be about, the quarterback play. If, Cam Ward can avoid the sophomore slump and, use the pieces that Tennessee has spent all this money on in the offseason, I would expect them to make a jump. Whether it's making the playoffs, I don't know, because, this division kind of beats each other up.
Yeah.
And then with Houston, I think we saw in the Patriots Texans game that offensive line needs to be rebuilt, torn down and rebuilt, because Stroud just doesn't have any time to get the ball off and make the plays that we've seen that he's been able to make. So, I don't think I have an answer for, how I predict the division's going to shake out this year, but it's definitely going to be a battle. And I could see kind of all teams floating around that 500 mark.
If you guys are running a franchise, do you want CJ Stroud or Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback?
I'd probably say Stroud.
I would probably say Trevor Lawrence. Okay. Healthy.
Sure. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, it's interesting just because both of those quarterbacks are out of the rookie phase and are now kind of stepping into, they're both going to, I think, be solid quarterbacks in the league for a while, but it'll be interesting to see, obviously there's more pieces to it, but quarterback's a big part of the franchise. It'll be interesting to see how they each progress. I felt like Trevor Lawrence had a much better season this year than he's had the previous few. I think that was Will might answer that question differently if we hadn't seen what had happened this past year with what Trevor Lawrence had done. So,
yeah, I definitely think my kind of saying my thing about CJ Stroud. I still kind of feel like Trevor, there needs to be another level to his game. I think CJ, he absolutely outperformed. I think as a rookie in his first year in Houston when he threw for over 4,500 yards and got him to the playoffs. I think Lawrence, there is another level that I think he can ascend to. I'm not saying he needs to be an all-pro like Patrick Mahomes or the others, but it kind of felt to Will's point, talking about the AFC playoffs, I thought Lawrence during that game against the Bills, he could have played a little bit better than I thought he did. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if Jacksonville will elevate to the level as they will look to repeat as AFC East champions. And I think maybe all of us are kind of in agreement. All of us are kind of not really buying Indianapolis stock yet. I think just like with Daniel Jones, obviously, I think Indianapolis has some good pieces on their roster, but I just don't know if Indy is, scaring anybody right now in their division, unless you guys have.
Alex, give me the quick version of how you were feeling when the Colts were on fire this year with a quarterback that was in New York the year prior.
I think Dad and I were not too happy. It's the Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones. Yeah. No matter what it is, it's they find the new teams and they get going. To be honest, I think Daniel Jones, I think, his ceiling, I think, is not going to be as high. I think, a lot of people saw Daniel Jones perform last year. I thought, his bubble was eventually going to burst. I think, obviously, like I said, I think Indianapolis has some really good offensive talent, but I do think that there just seems to be something missing in Indy. I don't know what it is. I think Chris Bauer's really missed on a couple of draft picks last couple of years. I think, they haven't done well in free agency. So I'm interested to see what Indy does do. But, I think that's the one team I think maybe all of us are in agreement that maybe could possibly take a step back just because, we don't know if Daniel Jones will hit that ceiling as far as a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, I think Ward, Lawrence, and Stroud, I think their ceilings are a lot higher than Daniel Jones's.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we'll delve into the AFC West now. And obviously the AFC West, last year I was a huge Denver Broncos fan, even though I know that was a disappointment when Bo Nix went down and really kind of was a disappointing AFC championship game. I certainly think Will and I probably wanted to see more points, even though it was a snowstorm essentially in the second half. And, I actually kind of wanted to throw that question to you before we do kind of talk about these 3 teams or 4 teams in the AFC West. How do you feel about snow games? Will, does that kind of excite you? I know my dad and I, we always kind of say, like, when football players are playing in the snow, is that kind of your feeling as a fan, or do you not like snow games that much?
I love them. I think any Patriots fan would say that they love them. And, whenever there is snow, I think Patriots fans think that the Patriots have the upper hand. Just given, the Vinatieri kicks back in the day, even when Tom Brady was playing the Titans in the regular season, I don't know in what year, but he threw for like 400 yards in the first half.
Right.
Yeah, we have some great memories in snow games, so I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that was a fun defensive game. But kind of discussing this though about the AFC West, though, obviously we have the 3 big teams going to really go at each other this year. Obviously, the Broncos defending AFC West champions, the Chargers. Really interesting offseason after they hired the Miami Dolphins' former head coach Mike McDaniel as their offensive coordinator. Chiefs, I have kind of said this the last couple of years. I think the Chiefs bubble probably did burst a little bit in that Super Bowl loss against Philly, but I think Kansas City's kind of been on the downturn these last 2 years. I mean, obviously they did get lucky in that year. They really kind of went to the playoffs, but then the Eagles basically just drubbed them in the Super Bowl. And then last year, I think it kind of really caught up to them. And, same thing with the Raiders this year as well. It's going to be interesting to see if Mendoza will be the number 1 overall pick. But kind of the question I have for the panel on the AFC West is this, kind of seeing what Bo Nix did last year. Obviously, we'll see what Herbert does with McDaniel, and obviously, hopefully, we'll see what Mahomes and Mendoza do. But which quarterback or which team do you think is under the most pressure in this division to perform? Because as we kind of said about the AFC South, this could be a division as well where all 4 of these teams could beat each other up as well. Which team do you think is under the most pressure going into this year in 2026?
I don't think it's the Raiders, right? Just because there's been so much movement. And you got a rookie quarterback that, even if he's the number 1 overall pick, you need to give him some time to get adjusted to the league and everything. I think the Chiefs, I guess you could call it pressure, but, when you've won as much as they have and you were a dynasty, if you don't have the years that back up like what it was like for the last few, I think, it's just maybe the end of a good, incredible run. I'd say I feel like the Chargers have been there for a while and just haven't been able to get over the hump or make anything happen. So, feel like if Herbert's had like incredible numbers and they just haven't, it seems like, been able to get over the hump or make a good run in the playoffs, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on them this year to potentially get over that hump. So, and I'd say the Broncos outperformed expectations last year with Bo Nix and everything. So I think they're kind of riding the high from the end of last season.
Want to jump in here, Will?
Yeah, sorry, I think I cut out for a second, but I'm back. Yeah, I think the Broncos have the most pressure. I think the fact that they were so close to making it to the Super Bowl with Stidham as quarterback, you kind of just think about what it could have been if Bo Nix was in there, and how maybe the Super Bowl would have been different. But I think Bo Nix and Sean Payton have such a good relationship. It's going to be interesting to see how, if they're able to take another leap, as they did in that second year with Bo Nix, if they can take it a step further. But also to the Chiefs, I just think to compare them to like the Golden State Warriors in that one year where Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, they had that one down year. They had I think they had the number 2 pick, and then rebuilt, and they were back in the championship. The Chiefs had a really bad year last year due to injuries and all these other causes, but they have a top 10 pick this year. They got Kenneth Walker III. They're kind of bolstering this roster as I think one last ride with like Travis Kelce and just trying to bring the band back together for one last ride. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to pull it off. But I don't necessarily think that's pressure for them because they've done it so many times already.
I was going to say, kind of just before we kind of wrap this up, which of those three major ones do you? Because I think Bo Nix, and obviously I think Patrick Mahomes obviously is I think Mahomes obviously is number one there. I think Nix is obviously the clear number two quarterback in that division. My thing is this about Herbert. I know people are kind of really hyping this up about McDaniel and everybody else, but I think with Herbert, I think if he has another clunker of a playoff game, I mean, obviously I think the first one that he had in Jacksonville was probably his best one, but his last two appearances in the playoffs, he's had some real clunker games. And my just thing about the Chargers is, I don't think it's a mental block from Herbert, but I just almost don't know. It's like, what does it seem like the Chargers need to do to almost get over this hump? I don't know if Mike McDaniel is going to be enough to do it. I mean, does Herbert have to take a step up in his game? Because I just don't know how much higher Herbert's ceiling can be. I mean, if he's going to go out and be like a Patrick Mahomes MVP favorite this year, some people are kind of saying that, but I just don't see him making that huge jump with just the way the AFC is right now.
Yeah, I kind of see Herbert and Stroud similarly. I think if the Chargers can just bolster their offensive line and just give their main playmaker the time and, the possibility to make plays, I think in that Mike McDaniel's offense, that's going to be interesting to see. And yeah, I think he's a really talented quarterback. I don't personally expect him to do that much, or the Chargers to go far in playoffs. It's kind of been that way ever since Phillip Rivers was the quarterback, and it's just a Chargers memory that I have throughout my life. But
right, you want to jump in here, Clay, a little bit?
I don't know that I have much else to add on that.
All right. We'll actually go back to the AFC North in just a little bit. We're actually going to go ahead and jump to Clay and Mai's division, the NFC East. We'll finally dump into some Giants and Redskins and Commanders and the Cowboys and Eagles. So we'll go ahead and we'll talk about Clay's Commanders here first. Obviously last year, just a bit of a disappointing season. Obviously, Jaden Daniels got hurt. I think it was in November, of last year, that kind of really threw the monkey wrench in their chances to at least get back to the postseason here. But, Clay and I certainly, I know we've talked about this, obviously I kind of said I did have my doubts about Dan Quinn as their head coach. I don't think, I obviously don't think he's on the hot seat at all, period. But, how do you see Washington kind of performing in the draft this year, and kind of how do you see them going into this offseason? How do you think Washington gets back to at least the playoffs?
I think we've made some moves to try to bolster the defense a little bit this offseason, which was obviously a huge need. It was so frustrating watching some of the games last year. It just seemed like teams were so easily able to move the ball down the field, and I was never big on Lattimore, and people were excited about him when we got him from the Saints, and I just thought he got beat over and over and over, and never really understood why people were so hype on him. And so I think hopefully we'll continue to see improvements on the defensive side. It'll be interesting to see if we go like more Dan Quinn style of football and try to draft on the defensive side, or if we try to, it doesn't seem like there's that much offensive firepower available early in the draft, and that's something we need too. But I don't know, I kind of feel like Washington might trade back. There's been a lot of talk about that potentially happening, so I don't know. This draft class compared to previous ones, it seems like isn't star-studded in terms of the talent at the top. And so I could see just with the way that Adam Peters has been running the things behind the scenes that, potentially trade back to try to get some more picks get some players to kind of fill some more holes as opposed to staying at the top. So we'll see.
Want to jump in here, Will, kind of see what you feel about Washington's needs?
Yeah. I think that Washington in the last two kind of off seasons has spent their money, and I think it's spent it pretty well. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the draft. I think, as Clay has mentioned, the possibility of trading back and gaining more assets, but I think Washington, although their record wasn't that great last year, I think they have some pretty big playmakers on their team, and I think they'll probably end up using those draft picks as not necessarily find that star-studded player, but kind of backfill positions in need.
What do you guys think about Jeremiah Love going to the Commanders? I've seen that in a few mock drafts. I don't know that I like it, but some people seem to really like it.
See, that's the thing. It's like I'm almost wondering if it might be like almost the Bijan Robinson effect. I think that's kind of what some people are comparing it to. I mean, just like, this is my feeling. I mean, my dad's told me this. I don't think you should really spend a high top 10 pick. I know sometimes they say like these running backs. So like they kind of say like whether it's Barkley or Robinson or whether it's going to be Love, if they're going to be unicorns like Derrick Henry or these feature backs, as I said, I think, I don't know. I mean, I really kind of think, like, as I've said, the days of feature backs in the NFL right now are just so low. But I think what Washington's really done well, and this is a testament even back to when they had Robert Griffin III and even Kirk Cousins, and even to some extent as well when they had Jaden Daniels, like when they basically had like that two running back set, or like when it was Robert Griffin III and Alfred Morris. I mean, when those two were really going at it in 2012, I mean, you could find these running backs that could be like diamonds in the rough, like the Giants kind of did with Scatabo last year when they drafted him in the 4th round. But I just don't think Washington would need to reach for Love. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't trade up to get him. I mean, I would rather have him wait to come to me, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't trade up if I was Washington.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is the future, but there's some. I don't know. He just makes me nervous. Maybe it's because I'm a Washington fan, but
gotta try
to. He makes me nervous when he runs, and he's
gotta try
giving me reason to.
Gotta try and protect himself, like Jackson Dart on the Giants. Both of them gotta learn to protect themselves better. And well, with that, actually, we'll go ahead and just jump right into my Giants too. We'll talk about the Cowboys and Eagles in a sec, but big news out of the Giants, though, trading Dexter Lawrence, for getting the Cincinnati Bengals 10th pick in the NFL draft. I really think the Giants fleeced Cincinnati in that regard, really getting the top 10 pick for them. And, the big story obviously has been John Harbaugh, obviously the big hire for us. I think, this is what I almost feel should be Harbaugh's goal, instead of really kind of getting the Giants just back to the playoffs, or basically, obviously, I know he hasn't won a Super Bowl since he was with the Ravens in 2012. I don't really think that should be Harbaugh's goal as a Giants fan. The way I kind of see it with Harbaugh is I think he should just get the Giants back to the playoffs. He's got a 4 or 5 year contract, but like when he leaves, he needs like a protege, kind of like how Baltimore did it when they got Jesse Minter, when they, basically, because he was a Harbaugh disciple with both John and his brother, obviously, who's with the Chargers right now. Minter was close in there too, but I certainly think that needs to be Harbaugh's kind of mindset. I think, if he does get the Giants to the Super Bowl in like the 4th or 5th season, great, but just like, I just don't think that should be his goal. I mean, Jackson Dart, I think Giants have, obviously they do have some holes. I do think they need to rebuild their offensive line a little bit. I like Scatabo. I know, obviously I think he, is going to probably get beat up a lot. Obviously if he and Dart are going 1 and 2 with each other, but I really like the way the Giants they attacked this offseason. I think Likely was a really nice pickup as well from Baltimore, but I'm definitely pleased with what the Giants have done this offseason. And I really don't think Harbaugh needs to ace this draft, but I just think he needs to kind of rebuild that Giants identity, in this draft. And I think he's done a really good job of it so far this offseason. And I think getting a player like Dexter Lawrence, when he traded him to Cincinnati, if he was going to be kind of, as they were saying, it's kind of what I've been reading, he was kind of a locker room cancer. He kind of was holding out. He was asking for more money. I mean, I think he's already kind of stamping, and he's just saying, the guys who want to be here, they're going to be here. And the guys who don't want to be here, you're going to leave, or we're going to find, other teams for you to play for.
Yeah, I think Harbaugh coming in, I think just building that foundation of like the culture that the New York Giants are going to, uphold moving forward. I think that's something that might have been lacking. You would obviously know more than I do, but I just think with all these young guys, these young talented guys that they've been accumulating over the last couple of years, they just need that strong, figurehead to be able to get them in line and get this thing moving in the right direction, because you can't be, picking in the top 5, top 10 every year. You gotta start making moves, because then all these rookies that you've been accumulating are, running out of their rookie deals. And I think the time is now. I think, they got to start making some serious strides in these next, 2 years. But I think they can do it.
I agree. You want to jump in here, Clay?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in New York for the in the recent past. I mean, Jackson Dart's an easy guy to get behind. Same with Scadaboo. I mean, the coach is there now, right? So it's, I'd be excited if I was New York Giants fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll actually go ahead and just finish the NFC East here, talk about the Eagles and the Cowboys a little bit here. Obviously, kind of like with Philadelphia, obviously the chatter has kind of been about them trading A.J. Brown. And, obviously I think, the Eagles, and the Cowboys, I think, they're what's really kind of been weird to me about the Eagles these last couple of years. I know obviously they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago when they beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but I don't know what is going on in that organization. I don't know like if there's like a power struggle between Sirianni and Roseman. I mean, I haven't been a fan of Sirianni, basically ever since he came from day one. I know he's successful, but he just kind of reminds me almost a bit of like the Buddy Ryan prototype for Eagles fans. He's almost like making himself like the enemy of like saying like to his players, or whether it's the fans or whatever it is. I just don't think like that's the right way to go here for Sirianni. I understand you can have the success behind it. I obviously I'm not throwing shade on his success, but I think, something's been holding the Eagles back, and it's kind of the same with the Cowboys too. I think obviously, it's Jerry Jones and, seeing like them surrounding Prescott, because they got Pickens for Prescott last year. They kind of really buffed up his receiving, but, their biggest weak link for Dallas was their defense after they traded Micah Parsons to the Packers basically before week 1 of the season last year. So kind of Clay, this is kind of between you and me here, and obviously I know Will can jump in with his opinion, but I almost am just wondering here, like, which of those two teams do you feel like is almost the more vulnerable right now? Do you think Philadelphia is more vulnerable, or do you think Dallas is? If I had to choose, I'd actually pick Philly.
Yeah, I think I'd pick Philly too. I mean, my view is tainted. I just hate Dallas. But they haven't given anybody a reason to be scared of them for a while. They always seem to have the talent, but just haven't been able to, make anything happen. And I think Philly's just, not the same as Kansas City, but it just seems, I agree with you. I think something just seems a little off, or maybe that's just the media twisting things, and we don't really have a good visibility into what happens behind closed doors, obviously. But I'd say Philly's more vulnerable just from the fact that they've, been at the top of the division for a while, and I think there's 2 exciting teams, with 3 really, but especially with New York and just Washington with young talent that I think could make some moves here in the next couple of years.
You want to jump in here, Will?
Yeah, I think I could see both of them being, equally as vulnerable. I think, Philly coming down, from the top of the division the last couple of years, they took a big step back, in my opinion, last year. And then we'll see if A.J. Brown's a Patriot by June 1st. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But Dallas just can never find a way to figure it out. And I don't even think, I don't know, they just haven't done it. And Dak is always, up or down. He's either an MVP candidate or, falls off. They're just so inconsistent where I just don't necessarily consider them a threat anymore, or haven't necessarily in like 20 years. So
it's going to be interesting because, I mean, Prescott, obviously, I think he's going into year, is it 10 or is it 11? I forget. I think he was drafted in 2016. So, I mean, obviously he's the oldest quarterback in the division, but, I almost think, as they've kind of said, Prescott's kind of been dealing with injuries the last couple of years too. So I'm almost wondering, probably not this draft, but, in a quarterback late in draft in a few years, I'm almost wondering if Dallas might draft their next successor to Prescott, maybe if they would give him, like, I don't know, 2 years on the bench or something, kind of the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre treatment or whatever it is. I wonder if that might be circling through Cowboys management in a few years down the road. So what we'll actually do is, because I think Clay actually
I can go a little longer than anticipated. Their family's running behind a little bit.
Okay, well, what I was going to say is we'll actually kind of discuss this a little bit later. We'll hold off the other few divisions, but what I kind of wanted to do, I know last night we kind of had some fun with some trivia discussion here, so we kind
I've got some prepared.
All right, so why don't we kind of jump into this segment a little bit here? We're going to just exchange some trivia with each other, and then we'll kind of just jump back to the discussion here. So if either one of you,
what are we calling the segment? It's like Stump Alex.
Well, this is actually kind of stump all of us a little bit.
Okay.
Kind of go in a circle a little.
All right, yeah, that sounds good. So I'll start it off. Can you name the 3 current NFL franchises that have never had the number 1 overall pick in the draft?
Okay.
Timely, right?
Yeah, it's a really good one.
It's tough. I mean, you got to kind of run through them all, right? Got to really know your draft history.
Tennessee
is not one.
Okay.
Green Bay
is not one.
I mean, literally could be anybody.
Yeah.
I know. I can give hints if needed.
How many are in the NFC?
1.
1. So it's 1 in the NFC and 2 in
One
the
NFC, 2 in the AFC.
Okay. That's good.
In the AFC, it's West and North.
Chargers.
Nope. This is tough. This is
This is great. That's a great one. Certainly Cleveland. Pittsburgh?
No. It feels so random when you look at the answers though, because it's like storied franchises and like successful franchises. But all right, you got AFC West. So you already guessed Chargers.
The Chiefs.
Nope. I guess including this draft, it's the other one. Broncos are one of them.
Yeah, and that's what I've kind of figured. Because that's crazy. Because I was thinking, because Elway, that was the Baltimore Colts.
Yeah.
Pick. Yeah.
He ended up going there. Yeah. And then the other two, the other one in the AFC is the Ravens. I've never had the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. I was trying to think.
And the NFC, and then the NFC, it's NFC West.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like that 96 draft, I think, when they drafted Lewis and Ogden, but neither one of those guys were first-round picks.
Yeah, number 1 overall.
Number 1 overall. What did you say who the NFC one was? Or
NFC West. Any ideas, or are you just taking shots in the dark?
Seattle?
Seattle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's good.
I've got one other one real quick on the NFL, and then I'll pass it.
All right.
Seahawks wide receiver. This is Super Bowl trivia. Seahawks wide receiver Cooper Kupp became in this past Super Bowl just the 6th former Super Bowl MVP to play in a Super Bowl with another team. Can you name the other 5 players who were former Super Bowl MVPs that went on to play in a Super Bowl with another team?
Wow. That's great.
One is a no-brainer.
Brady.
Brady.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's 4 left.
Correct.
Star, Namath, Dawson.
And I can give teams if we need it. That'll give big hints, but
Jerry Rice.
Jerry Rice is one. 49ers, then the Raiders.
Yeah. Good one there. Good one, Will. I think 70s.
There's another pretty obvious one that I think I would have gotten.
Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
The other 2 are a little tougher.
Okay. 71.
One is still active. The other is not.
Okay.
One defense, one offense.
Von Miller.
Von Miller.
Nice, Will. Good job.
Joe Montana.
Joe Montana's a good guess. No, not Joe Montana.
Yeah. That was good.
Quarterback, though.
Bradshaw. Wasn't Bradshaw. Wasn't Starbuck. Not Montana. Not Theismann.
Kind of good quarterback, but not like, would never be mentioned as an all-time great, in my opinion.
Talk about Mendoza in a sec. We'll kind of finish up this. Wow.
Rams, then Cardinals. Quarterback.
Warner.
Kurt
Warner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's all I got. Nice work, guys.
Okay. I'll say this one. This is kind of not really trivia, but this is just kind of a number guess. Obviously, I'm kind of wearing my bad Mets thing, 7-16.
Oh gosh, brutal.
Not a good start for us, but this is the crazy stat. So like I'm going to give you the stat, but I'm going to give you kind of the blank of the number. You'll have to guess the number essentially,
Okay.
not the player. So since 1903 in Major League Baseball, so since 1903, 138 teams since then. So 1903 to 2026, 138 teams have at least had 12 game losing streaks. Obviously, the Mets, is one of them. But they've had 12 game losing streaks. How many teams of those 138 finished with a record over 500 for the whole season? I'll give you 3 guesses each. I'll give you guys 3 guesses, and I'll say this: it's at least under 15.
I was gonna say 5.
That was my original guess too. That's not it, but that was my original guess.
8.
Not 8.
6.
Not 6.
3.
Not 3.
11.
You were a little closer on the first one you guessed and the last one you guessed before you guessed 11.
Is it like 1?
4.
Wow.
You had 5 and 5. You had 5 and then you had 3. And
Yeah.
The number in the middle. That shocked me. That just.
I read a similar stat, I think, Alex, that in a newsletter that I read. I think it might have been on because of the Mets struggles recently. See if I can find it.
Yeah, we can kind of go back while Clay's doing this. One of our commenters just was asking about Francisco Mendoza thoughts here. I'll kind of just give my quick thoughts about him as the number 1 overall pick. If that is what it is projected for the Raiders, I definitely wish Mendoza the best of luck. I mean, when I watched his Heisman speech and what he did this year at Indiana, I think is probably one of the greatest sports stories, we'll see like this decade. But I definitely think though that what's important about this though for Francisco Mendoza, I kind of almost see in him almost like, correction, Fernando Mendoza. I know I kind of someone just said Francisco. I meant for Fernando Mendoza, but just what I was gonna say though about him though is that I almost kind of see Mendoza almost kind of as a Jared Goff kind of quarterback. I don't really think he's going to be a quarterback like a Jackson or anything else. He's going to be probably like a system quarterback, and maybe Brady and company in Vegas do have that idea of basically surrounding the team. I mean, I know they got GNT. I know they got some good pieces offensively. They do have to really fix that defense. That's been the number one bad thing I think for the Raiders over the last 10 years, really ever since like Jack Del Rio, John Gruden, Rich Bisaccia. No matter who their coach was, they just could not fix their defense for Derek Carr or basically any of their quarterbacks. But I think if the Raiders do play it smart, I'm not saying Mendoza is going to be like the best quarterback in that division. I think maybe possibly if he has more playoff success, I think he could probably surpass Herbert if Herbert still has the clunkers in his games, because I think Nick's ceiling is a little bit higher. I think there's another level for Nick's to go to, and I think if, like I said, if Herbert just kind of struggles winning playoff games and Mendoza and the Raiders can turn it around at least in his tenure, I definitely think it's possible that Mendoza could be the third best quarterback in the AFC West. Excuse me. I mean, you guys want to kind of give your thoughts about the Raiders with Mendoza, or
I wouldn't be super excited. I feel like if I were the Raiders and I was drafting, if I knew I was drafting Mendoza.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's New York Giants for me. Obviously, all three of our teams have our quarterbacks of the future. Drake May's gonna have a stellar, hopefully full sophomore campaign. Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart, they got some ways to go before they enter Drake May's company. You go ahead and continue, Clay, though.
No, I don't know. I maybe it's the optics or maybe it's the goofiness of him, and I don't necessarily question his ability to lead a team, but I don't know. I think he's going to get a big wake-up call this first year. That's going to be a big change of pace to the NFL. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Will, you want to jump in?
Yeah. I mean, Fernando's a fun guy to root for. I wish him well, but him being in Las Vegas is going to be interesting. Like being a Raider, like he doesn't really, scream like the old school Raiders, kind of thing. But I think, it's a tough division to get thrown into. I think they're going to give him the opportunity to play and kind of grow. I like what they did signing that center. I can't remember his name. Was it Lindenbaum or something?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was a great move on their part, just to get a solidified guy who has played in big games and can kind of help him through that entry into the league. But I think it might be a rough start, but I'm not going to say that he can't like you said, kind of surpass Herbert or perform well in the division, as long as the Raiders, continue to build around him and, give him the right opportunities.
Mm-hmm. It like I kind of said, it is going to be interesting. I mean, it's funny, kind of as I said about kind of the system quarterbacks that the Raiders have kind of tapped into. Obviously, I know this is a far cry, but the Raiders, essentially, it's kind of like how they've kind of played the system, throughout. It's almost like they had Gannon obviously really early, and that's really the last time that the Raiders were any success, in that 3-year run they had with both Gannon and then Gruden. And then, Derek Carr kind of held down the fort. I know he got him to the playoffs twice, but, like I said, I definitely think, I really don't think like his ceiling is going to be like Herbert or Mahomes. I think, he and Bo Nix, like essentially like their ceilings will remain the same. But, like we said, we've seen some crazy rookie stories. Obviously we'll see what happens, once the draft, begins, and, hopefully we'll see what the Raiders do this offseason. So, it's definitely going to be interesting how that division will play out, if basically all 4 quarterbacks are going to be delving it out. Like I said, the AFC is going to be, like I kind of mentioned this, it's like 10 teams, I think, in the AFC of the 16 will be competing essentially for 7 spots. I definitely think it's going to be at least like 10 teams. You can say like 3 in the AFC West, 3 in the AFC South, obviously the 2 in the AFC East we talked about, and then possibly maybe 2, possibly 3. Who knows if Cincinnati could get it right? Obviously I think Pittsburgh's going to blow it all up, with Rodgers and company. But it's I think the AFC North is obviously I think it's certainly the weakest division now, which is kind of saying something. Obviously I know we always talk about if Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cincinnati are at full strength. Basically those 3 teams, but I think the AFC North is probably the weakest of any of the AFC divisions right now.
Yeah, guys, I got to run. Thanks for putting this on, Alex.
Yeah. I'll talk to you later, Clay. Okay.
See you guys.
Yeah.
See you,
pleasure. All right. Yeah,
No.
I know that was, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I saw one of the comments mention that that Cousins was on the Raiders. I had totally forgot that he had signed there. First of all, congrats to him for getting a big payday again. But,
Again, with Atlanta and now Raiders. Yeah.
But I do think the Cousins, kind of mentoring Mendoza, I think they'll kind of work well together and are kind of similar personalities and kind of can, bounce off each other well. So I think that'll definitely be a good piece to have with Mendoza.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. So, I know we kind of skipped over you though for trivia. I know it's only just down to us 2 here, but if you have something for me though, you can lay a trivia question on me if you got one right off the bat.
I actually didn't have any prepared, but I was kind of thinking of one as we were kind of going through that, but I'm transitioning to NBA. I don't know if this is
sounds good.
So the NBA playoffs has been happening, and I've seen Dirk Nowitzki on like NBA Prime coverage for the playoffs. Can you tell me what team he was drafted by?
So say who is this again? What is the player?
Dirk Nowitzki. He was the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
from power forward for the Mavericks.
So the team he was originally drafted by.
Yeah,
that's a good one. Wow. I'll probably say. Can you at least give me which conference?
The Eastern Conference. Yeah, Eastern Conference.
Mm-hmm. Man. I'm just gonna cheat here. Just gonna look up teams. I'm not gonna look his name up.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably say the Magic.
It was not the Magic.
Not the Magic.
Yeah, it was the Milwaukee Bucks.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about the like I said, talking about the international players, it's just like, I was talking about this with Clay, you kind of always kind of see like about all these gentle giants, just like, like whether it's Jokic or Giannis. Obviously, I know Nowitzki was, the big talent from Germany that, he was all of his years with the Mavericks. I don't know why my Knicks can't really kind of get an international player. I know they drafted Porzingis, but I mean, when he was with the Knicks, and it's kind of been the story of his career. He's kind of been banged up with injuries, mostly with him. But it's amazing to me, with the crop of the international players, and obviously we're seeing Wembanyama now with the Spurs. I'm hoping he's okay. That was a scary fall when I saw that. I know they said he's in concussion protocol. I hopefully wish him the best, and hopefully he will recover soon. But kind of talking a little bit about the NBA, though, I know this postseason's kind of been off to a really weird start. I know obviously my Knicks won game 1, they lost game 2, but kind of the same with Boston as well. It's like you guys lost to the 76ers in game 2, and Portland and San Antonio, that series is tied 1-1. It's like kind of been a weird start to the NBA postseason.
Yeah, definitely. Tight series. You had the Lakers too being up 2-0 against the Rockets. Kind of surprising to me, especially with Luka and Austin Reeves out. But yeah, it's the first round can get a little messy sometimes, but usually the favored teams will eventually make it through. You don't see a whole lot of upsets in the first round of the NBA playoffs, so it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. But didn't mean to switch it into NBA talk. If we want to get
that's fine. I know I kind of was hoping that we would kind of jump in a little discussion about that, but yeah, we're just going to kind of randomize some things here. I know we're kind of nearing almost an hour here. Hopefully we'll be on here for another 5-10 minutes, just kind of wrap some things up here. But probably like the next thing I kind of wanted to discuss, though, is probably just like in this case, in terms of like the final 3 divisions in the NFC. I know we kind of overlooked the AFC North a little bit. I kind of mentioned in my thing, I had mentioned, certainly I know Pittsburgh, I feel like, obviously I know they say about Rodgers, I think, maybe he's got 1 year left. I don't think Pittsburgh really is going to be holding on to him much longer. I definitely think they need to blow things up. We'll see about Lamar Jackson and Jesse Minter, and Cincinnati. I was almost kind of thinking about this today. This was probably pretty crazy of me to think this, but I'm almost wondering if Joe Burrow, if I know they obviously got Dexter Lawrence and everything, but if he really wants out of Cincinnati, I'm almost wondering if someone would be foolish to trade for Burrow, because kind of training this back to the NBA, and this discussion here, I was just saying this to my dad before the podcast. I almost feel Burrow's trade package and Giannis with the Bucks, of all the talks that are here, I think you're going to get less value for both of them right now, just because like they've been just so banged up. But I wonder if one team would be, I wouldn't say silly enough, but just like they kind of feel like there would still be some trade packages out there for him. But I kind of think, as I mentioned, I think kind of Burrow and Giannis is like it's kind of one and the same. It's like, do you really want to trade for a guy who has been banged up the last couple of years and he hasn't really played a full season?
Yeah, I do think the Joe Burrow watch, especially if things go poorly, it's definitely going to heat up. And depending on how healthy he is throughout the season, and how he looks and how he's into the game mentally, because there were rumors about that. Does he still even love playing anymore, and
right.
Things of that nature. It'll be interesting to see what the trade value would be. But I definitely think quarterbacks are so hard to come by. If you can, there's definitely going to be a team out there that will be like, hey, I'll absolutely give up, if they have a lot of draft assets or whatever it may be, like give that up to get a proven guy in this league, on their team.
Right. Yeah. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how it goes there. And then Yeah, just buzzing over the last three divisions then in the um, NFC. Obviously, we kind of saw how the NFC North was last year. Obviously the Chicago Bears were the big surprise story last year. Caleb Williams and Chicago really winning their first division title since 2018, kind of getting their first postseason win, I believe, since 2010 last year. Green Bay, certainly we'll see about Jordan Love, kind of a really strange year in Green Bay last year. And then obviously we have, the Vikings and the Lions playing catch up at 9-8 last year. It definitely the NFC North, I think, is like that's going to be a tough division in itself. And then obviously the NFC South too. It's like that's probably going to be a one team bid as well. And then NFC West is probably going to be three teams. So kind of as I said, like the AFC is probably going to have 10. I almost kind of feel like the NFC, maybe two in the NFC East, maybe one, like I said, in the NFC South, three in the NFC West, and then possibly, I don't know, like maybe two or three, maybe four. Who knows? I mean, obviously, I don't think that would ever happen in the NFC North. All four teams would make it in. But again, it's like, that's, as I said, what, 6, 7, that's like 10 teams again battling for 7 spots. I mean, how do you just kind of see like the NFC playoff picture developing, as far as like the other three divisions? I know we talked about the NFC East. How do you kind of see those other three divisions playing out?
Yeah, I think there are 10 legit teams that are going to be vying for those playoff spots, and I think it's going to be a fight to the end to get those kind of bottom seeds. But the NFC North is one of my favorite divisions just to watch on TV. I feel like there's just a lot of star power and typically like high scoring games with the Lions, which everyone loves points. But I think it'll be interesting to see Caleb Williams, if he's able to kind of repeat the success that they had. Ben Johnson had a great first year as head coach. His post game hype ups with the team were always pretty funny and exciting to watch. But they have a lot of weapons with Rome Odunze. I think DeAndre Swift is still there, and Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet. They got some firepower, and then with the Packers, I feel like Jordan Love is kind of in that Justin Herbert world for me.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, after the first full year with kind of like Micah Parsons there, that was kind of a last second, addition to the team. Everyone's kind of got a full year under them. They drafted their first wide receiver in the first round.
Yeah.
Forever last year. We'll see if Golden can kind of step up and become a real playmaker. The Vikings, I'm not super high on, just with their quarterback situation. And then, and then the Lions, I think some of their game plans, whether it's going forward on fourth down all the time, or just being loose with the ball, and they are kind of trying to be like the Showtime Lakers, just putting up a bunch of points. I
think Dan Campbell's aggressiveness has kind of waned a little bit the last couple of years in Detroit.
Yeah, so I think they'll have to tighten it up if they want to kind of be in the same conversation as the Bears and the Packers.
Yeah, I definitely think, kind of just jump into the NFC South as well. Obviously I thought Bryce Young last year, I thought, there's still question marks about him. I think really there's question marks about all four teams in the NFC South right now. Hopefully we'll kind of see like which of those quarterbacks kind of is almost it, because it's like you got Spencer Rattler with the Saints. Atlanta's got a really interesting decision as well. They got Penix, they got Tagovailoa. Now that's going to be, I think, interesting quarterback competition between them two if it does open up to be that way. Obviously, I don't think Bryce Young is, as I mentioned, kind of like the ready quarterback. I think he still is going to have his ups and downs. but Baker Mayfield, I think, Mayfield last year, I know last year was kind of a down year for Tampa Bay, 8-9, but it's amazing to think, that Mayfield is the best quarterback in this division, when he basically probably was, when he was with Cleveland, at least, and you could kind of say the same in Carolina. People were kind of thinking he might have been like the lower one in that division, even though when he first started in the AFC North, though, in 2018 in his rookie season, because that's the same draft that had Lamar. So, but it's going to be interesting to see how that NFC South plays out. And like I said, I think that's certainly just going to be a one bid division.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Saints, they're not ready to be in the conversation as a playoff team or a division winner yet. I think you're going to see a lot of Tua. I think you're going to see a lot of Penix next year. I just don't see either of them being healthy. So it's kind of whoever is good to go on a given week will go. I was super happy for Bryce Young and the Panthers just to make it to the playoffs after, all the stuff that he's gone through, and kind of the slack that he was getting early on in his career.
Yeah.
But, still they were one game under 500, so they're not necessarily a good team. It'll be interesting to see if they can take another step. But the Bucks, like Baker Mayfield was, an MVP candidate through the first 6 weeks last year, which is crazy. But they lost Mike Evans. The kind of consistency that they've had in that organization, even after Baker took over for Brady, a lot of the guys that kind of held the Buccaneers culture, they're not necessarily there anymore. So it's really like Baker's team now, and it'll be interesting to see if he can learn from his previous stops, being the number one guy, and then in the downfall, if he can kind of rally the troops to win the division in a not necessarily strong division.
It'd be interesting to see if Mayfield might be like the first ever franchise quarterback in Tampa Bay history, because they've kind of had some short string guys. Obviously, I know people thought maybe Jameis Winston would have been it last decade, but if Mayfield keeps doing what he's doing, is he could be like the true franchise quarterback of the Buccaneers after, like you said, all the stops. Obviously, started in Cleveland, then he went to Carolina, and then kind of really when Tampa Bay basically had the 1 year deal they gave Mayfield, he kind of seemed to really humble up. And I definitely think the Mayfield contract that Tampa Bay originally gave him to basically extend him that 3-year deal, it's that should have almost basically been like what the Giants should have done with Daniel Jones all those years ago, instead of giving him the big bucks. I think that Mayfield contract kind of needs to be replicated by those guys who are kind of like in between the 10 and 15 best quarterbacks, in the NFL. It's just so in that way, it's because the talk's always been how you kind of manage the salary cap, and you can't always just give big bucks to the quarterback, which is kind of the remedy, as I said, to that point, kind of the same what Seattle did with Sam Darnold, before the season began. Kind of was the same. It might have been a little more than what Mayfield earned in that contract, but just you look at what the Sam Darnold contract did, and obviously he had the team around him to do it, and Seattle ran all the way to the Super Bowl with him. And now obviously kind of we're jumping into the NFC West right now, but I'll say this, I think what's crazy about Seattle, when I saw the post game and everything after they won the Super Bowl, this is no shade to your Patriots, obviously, but I think what was scary for me about Seattle is I don't think it really sunk in yet, but unlike Darnold or any of those guys, it's it's they were just kind of taking it all in, and all of a sudden they're are we the champions? It's I just don't think that really set in with Seattle, which I think is just a testament just to really how dangerous, and I think how underrated I think Seattle has been over the last 15, 16 years. Because I looked this up. I couldn't believe this. It's Seattle since 2010, the fewest wins they ever had in a season is only 7. And that's saying that's a testament to John Schneider and obviously what he's done as GM, whether it was with Carroll and now obviously Mike McDonald. But I think, Seattle, I think, has been, a sleeping giant for, quite some time.
Yeah. I mean, last year they just had some dogs on their team.
Yeah.
And, the emergence of JSN was, incredible to watch. Kenneth Walker coming back after a couple injury-riddled seasons. But I cannot say that I was confident at all going into the Super Bowl last year. You didn't hear a lot of stuff coming out of the Seahawks camp, and you kind of just had a feeling that they were incredibly locked in. You heard all the stuff from how dominant their defense was, and everything that was said, glowingly about them is absolutely true. They kicked the crap out of the Patriots, and they absolutely deserved it. They still have most of the same guys still on the team, with the exception of Walker and
I think Love as well. I think Love found another team. I forget where Julian Love went. I thought, well, no, not him, but I think it was one of their other
quarterbacks.
That's it, Woolen. Yeah.
I mean, he's nasty, so that's going to be a big loss. But I think they'll find a way to recoup that. But yeah, I don't see them breaking that streak of being or what am I trying to say? They're definitely going to win more than 7 games again next year. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, like I said, we'll kind of just finish this up here. If you want to just kind of give your thoughts about like the last 2 teams of the NFC South, and we might have just like one more trivia question with each other before we close it out for the night.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the 49ers, I think they kind of go as Brock Purdy goes. They have all the weapons in the world offensively. The addition of Mike Evans is going to help them out a lot. I think as, the number one kind of deep threat there, they'll probably get rid of Ayuk, which has been kind of just a weird cloud over their head for the last 2 years, it seems like. So I expect them to be towards the top of the NFC West, and then the Rams too. I think if Stafford can play anywhere close to what he did this past season, I think they'll have a shot to be up there. Puka Nacua can take another big step. And Kyron Williams, I think, he didn't sign anywhere else, did he? He's still in the.
Sure. Yeah.
He's a weapon out of the box. So, their defense is also very good for their linebackers and their secondary. So, yeah, I think it'll be a similar, end to the season when you come back and look at the records in the NFC West. I think it's going to be, 3 teams with, 11 wins and above, and it's going to be a fight for them to kind of make it through each other in the playoffs too.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting how that NFC West does play out. I don't know how Stafford does it. At his age, it's kind of as the question I was saying about with Dak Prescott as well in Dallas. Obviously, I think at some point, like the needle is going to have to move on. Whether it is just a matter of seeing like if there's going to be a quarterback draft class, in a few years, because certainly McVay is going to have to figure that out at some point. But definitely, I mean that's going to be a tough division though. Those 3 teams battling it out. Seattle, San Francisco, and the Rams. Obviously we'll kind of see, because we kind of talked about this about Minnesota. Obviously, Kyler going to Minnesota, that will be interesting. I don't know how the Cardinals will kind of address it. Maybe they're going to give Jacoby Brissett kind of the thing, kind of one of your old Patriot quarterbacks, trying to see if he kind of figures it out in Arizona. Who knows what happens with the Cardinals, what they feel their needs are in the draft. But, definitely it's going to be an interesting NFL draft tomorrow night. It will be interesting to see how these teams, use the draft. And to Clay's point, as he kind of said earlier, this just does not really seem like, almost just kind of feels like a draft, like where you would almost want to just be like smart on who you draft. Obviously you would want to address your needs, but it's like to Clay's point, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of really true star power, probably outside of maybe like the first 10 or so picks. So,
yeah, I feel like every, week going into the draft, all the analysts and the mock draft guys, they try and hype it up saying that there's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of trades happening on draft night. And, I don't know. I think this year it could actually happen. I think, the end of the first round, there's typically a lot of trades just moving back and some teams trying to sneak up to get a wide receiver late in the first round or something like that. I think some movements definitely coming down the track here on day one.
All right. Well, I think that's gonna go ahead and actually that'll wrap it up for our discussion here for tonight. Probably just before we head out, though, I kind of figured maybe we would exchange one last trivia question with each other before we do close this out for the night here. So I'm gonna kind of go into your Boston sports brain here a little bit on this one here. I was trying to think of a really good one though. Let me think. Okay, here's a kind of a cross relationship between kind of the Red Sox and the Mets actually here a little bit. This kind of delves into baseball a little bit. So the manager of actually this isn't a trivia. I'll just kind of this I kind of thought was an interesting fact. So
yeah.
Obviously I know you and I weren't born at this moment in time, but I think in 1975 though, the Boston Red Sox, their major league manager, his name was Darryl Johnston, I think was his name, when they went to that when they played the Cincinnati Reds in that epic 7-game series in 1975. What I thought was interesting though is I remember like Keith Hernandez was saying in an interview, this was like a couple of years ago, but I think he said that manager who was on the Red Sox in 75, who unfortunately lost to the Cincinnati Reds in the Big Red Machine, I guess in 86, he was the Mets head scout when they defeated the Red Sox in 86. I thought that was really interesting when he kind of mentioned that out. I don't think that was the, curse or whatever. And I always thought Buckner got a bad thing. I always remember like that Vince Scully call, like at the very end, it was like he said like, "Hey Boston, you gave it your best shot, but you came up a buck short." I kind of thought that kind of rubbed Buckner, I think, the wrong way. I mean, he was such a good player. It's like, he was with the Cubs, I think, for a couple of years. I mean, I think people really underrated, basically how good Buckner was. Obviously, I know he didn't win a World Series or anything, but I mean, he was a darn good player. And I think even that year in 86 for your Red Sox, even though he kind of battled through injury, I mean, I think he batted over 100 RBIs that year. I'll take a look at Buckner's numbers if you want to think of something for me, but I just always kind of think of that and just like saying, it's kind of a shame, just like how they kind of say like baseball's always seen to find people, but yeah, just like right here, Buckner in 86, he only had 18 home runs, but he had 102 RBIs in 153 games that year for the Red Sox. I mean, yeah,
he was a great player. He obviously got a ton of slack for that behind the bag, but in the last decade at Fenway Park, they usually they brought him out a bunch of times.
That's great.
They give him his flowers for what he's done, and a lot of people forget that there was another game the next day that the Red Sox could have won, and none of
they were up 3-0.
Yeah. But yeah, Bill Buckner was a great player.
He is.
I didn't necessarily have another trivia question.
Okay.
This is just more of a generic question. Who were your favorite Mets players growing up? Because I can think of a handful of like the mid 2000s Mets teams that had a bunch of great players that I always enjoyed watching. But
yeah, I remember telling you about this. I think in our first thing, I think Piazza for me though is head and shoulders. I think above everybody else. I think obviously I think David Wright is up there too. Piazza, David Wright. I don't know. I think kind of showing respect to the 2006 team. Obviously that was such a really good team. Obviously they lost to the Cardinals in Game 7 of that NLCS that year, but yeah, I really kind of think, like I kind of said, I think if I really had to say, if someone told me if I had to choose between Piazza or Wright as my favorite Mets player of all time, I know obviously I was really young when Piazza was there, but I just think in Piazza's standing, the kind of person, the player he was, I just think he is. I think he's a true legend. I definitely think he is one of the more underrated catchers, of all time. And it's funny. I'll even say this. This I think is really cool. This is a great way to finish this kind of the Mets and Red Sox comparisons between us as Boston sports fans. You'll have to see this video. I don't know if it's on YouTube or something. I'm not sure, but I think this was like a MLB documentary. I think on Piazza. But I think when Piazza was growing up, his father. I'll say this: Piazza's godfather was Tommy Lasorda for the Los Angeles Dodgers. But I guess Piazza and his dad, they built like a batting cage for Piazza, like when he was just like a teenager or whatever. But I guess one of his neighbors at a time was the great Ted Williams for your Boston Red Sox, and I thought this was amazing. Like what Ted Williams was saying about Piazza, or just kind of giving him tips or whatever on just like his swing and everything. It was like Williams said like about Piazza, like he's like got like one of the best swings I've ever seen. And I think there was like the one scene, I think, like when Williams said like, "I'll be your agent." It's like it's just like that's major respect from the legendary Ted Williams, to say that about Piazza, like basically when he was really in high school, for crying out loud. It's like who knew what he was gonna become, obviously in his great years he had with the Dodgers, and then a pretty solid 3-4 year run he had with the Mets too.
Yeah, no, I saw that clip with Piazza and Williams. That was a great clip, and he turned out to be one of, if not the best, catcher in baseball, or hitting catchers at least. And he did it for a number of different teams too. Like he performed wherever he went, and I always think of him in the World Series, the Subway World Series. And he was just a legend for the Mets, even if he wasn't there for as long as you would have hoped.
I always despise when Roger Clemens threw that broken bat at Piazza. I'll never forget that. And like that was kind of Piazza's thing. I just always despised Roger Clemens, whether he was with the Red Sox or even with the Yankees. Obviously, I know both of us can share that same hatred of Roger Clemens in that regard.
Absolutely.
But just like I said, though, just kind of summing this up, though, like, I definitely think, obviously, like in Mets standing, obviously, I think I'm not sure if they have retired Piazza's number. I think they did, but I can't remember when the Mets did do that. But, I was just going to say, I know I kind of was reminiscing about Piazza with my Mets and everything. I just kind of wanted to delve into your Red Sox just briefly, just like, I know you kind of mentioned to me, like David Ortiz was kind of your childhood hero. Was there kind of anybody else on the Red Sox you kind of looked up to, or kind of somebody you liked?
Yeah, Ortiz, Pedro, Manny, loved Dustin Pedroia. He was one of my favorites. Mike Lowell, Kevin Youkilis, Ellsbury before he went to the Yankees. Just there's been so many guys that have come across the Red Sox, kind of, whether it's been for short stints like Piazza, and like Chris Sale is one of my favorites more recently. Obviously Mookie, it still haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
I can't watch the Red Sox right now.
I know.
The Red Sox Yankees tonight, but I'm sure it's not good for the Red Sox.
I always kind of, this is the thing I actually kind of do, to be honest, actually, kind of like when I'm bored or something, if I just want to watch baseball, it's that really cool series on a MLB Network, baseball seasons. It's like their first year was like all the way back like in 1959, but it's like there's like 25 episodes of it, and I just kind of just randomly just choose one, and just kind of just like if I'm just doing something, whether it's just like just like looking up research or something, I just have it in the background, but just kind of seeing the stories and the players of yesteryear, in the 50s, 60s, and 80s, just kind of saying like what the game was like and what it is. I mean, because I just really think it's a damn shame that like I kind of was saying, it's like if baseball is definitely going to go on strike next year with with all the things about the Dodgers and whether things are going to happen of that, I think I think a lot of fingers are going to have to be pointed at Manfred. I know a lot of people seem to say like they like him, they feel like he gets the pulse of the fans, but I think kind of like the same with Seelig. I think both him and Seelig, they've had some really bad screw ups, and you can't at some point, it's like public opinion, it's not going to go your way. Eventually, you're going to, get enough haters, and, people say, changes need to be made.
Yeah, it's a shame, especially like coming out of the World Baseball Classic. I feel like, baseball is in a hot spot right now. And, with this impending, lockout, you never know how long those are going to last, what the repercussions are going to be, with the kind of changes also going on in the MLB PA, and with Tony Clark's being letting go, and you don't know how that's going to affect kind of the sentiment that the players have had going into it. So I mean, you just want baseball in late March, early April, and if next year that doesn't happen, that's going to be a real shame, and kind of halt all the progress that has been made, these last couple of years.
Agreed. All right. Well, I think that's going to go ahead and actually do it for my podcast here tonight. I definitely would really like to thank both Will and Clay for taking some time here. And, I'm actually definitely really considering, kind of getting this podcast really kind of back on track. I'm kind of really I'm really debating kind of like once the NFL draft comes to a close, whether it's next week or a few years, not a few years, but probably maybe next week or later this month, I'm kind of reveal. I think I might have sent this to you and Clay like a couple of years ago when I kind of gave like those draft grades to your team. I might just kind of like have some like individual podcasts, like kind of like how I break down like each team. So like I said, I'm trying to kind of always come up with ideas, and obviously I know, my cousins in Syracuse and everybody else, I'd love to hopefully, get almost everybody on, once, hopefully we have time at some point. It would be great for all of our cousins to join on here and, give our sports takes on our favorite teams and things of that nature. But as I said, though, I'd like to thank both you and Clay for taking your time and joining me here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have a blast coming on, and looking forward to doing it, down the line. And I wish the Giants the best in tomorrow's draft. Hopefully they get some guys that the fans like at 5 and 10. And
same with the Patriots too. Get that number one receiver, as I mentioned, and that offensive line. You can build that up. Like I said, I think the Patriots. This is no shade on my cousins who are Bills fans. This will be kind of like my last fact, of the night, is that I think like the Bills, like from 2019 to 2025, this last year, like that 6-7 year stretch, like that's the longest postseason streak the Bills have ever had in their franchise's history. Actually, I think that's the most consecutive times they've made the postseason. The previous was when they had Kelly and the Bills in the 90s, as we kind of mentioned earlier. But if that becomes a rivalry, really good rivalry once again between the Patriots and the Bills for the next couple of years, with Alan and May battling it out. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a blast. I can't wait.
It will be. Well, I'd like to thank all of our fans joining us here tonight. This is Alex and Will Harris signing off for AFC's Sport Talk podcast tonight. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you tune in for hopefully one of my next podcasts, hopefully in a few weeks. Have a good night, everybody.